What is up, all you freaking knife nerds out there? Welcome back to the Steel to Stone channel. So let's go ahead and get into this, get after it, and talk about the results of this little impact resistance and edge stability test I did between the K390 Endura and the Spyderco Shaman and Zwear. So I've had this Zwear Shaman for a good little while now. I've sharpened it, put 5 edges on it so far, and wanted to do a little bit of testing to see how it holds up in these sort of hard use or abuse tasks in comparison to what I consider to be probably my favorite steel in K390. So this is just going to be a fairly short test. I'm going to do 5 cuts on the 12 gauge wire with each knife, 5 edge hits up against a copper block as well as an aluminum block, and then scrape the edge across the corner of the copper block as well, and then we'll end the test after that. Both these knives are sharpened at 17 degrees per side on the Ruxin Pro with silicone carbide stones, finished on 600 grit and stropped on a 1 micron strop on basswood. And yeah, so everything should be fairly equal, even though the Endura is a good bit thinner behind the edge. They're at the same angle. And with the wire here, they both handled this really well. The Shaman handled it beautifully. I didn't see any damage at all on the Shaman. Didn't see any change in the level of sharpness really at all. The Endura took a little spot there that you could see, but it was very, very minor and didn't seem to change the sharpness level very much either. So they both handled that pretty well. And then moving on to the copper block. And if you guys saw my performance test a while back on the Endura, K390 is freaking amazing. I love this stuff in terms of its stability at the edge, its ability to withstand impact within reason is phenomenal, and the edge retention on top of that, that's why I say this is probably my favorite tool steel. And you can see there it did cause like a very minor disruption of the apex, I guess you could say, very fine chipping or micro chipping as I like to call it, but nothing major. Still cleanly slices the paper. And K390 is just awesome. Every time I do something like this with it, I'm just like, damn, because like the edge on the Endura is still usable after this test, like really, really usable. Like it's barely damaged at all. And here, let's do the Shaman, take a look at it. 5 hits again. I try to use the same amount of force on these knives when I do this, but I am not a robot. I am human. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, try to do the same amount of force each time, and do the best that I can. But as you can see here, 3 or 4 little chips there. Very small chips, but nonetheless to a greater extent than what I got on the Endura. So definitely not bad, but that's the reason I wanted to do this, to see which one was better. Or not necessarily better, but which one holds up to this better. So moving on to the aluminum. 5 more hits. And I already had some chips in the edge around the belly there, and I wasn't sure. I went a little too far down that first time, so I wasn't sure exactly which one what chips the aluminum caused. So I decided to do it again in a different spot to make sure that it was actually causing the damage and it wasn't already there. So do it one more time. Again down here. And here you can see It definitely deformed it, took the apex off, and actually caused more disruption in the shape of the edge over what the copper did right down below that, where it just sort of lightly chipped it. And then do the Endura here. There's one little spot there, or yeah, you can't really see that, just looks like embedded aluminum, but there was one little small spot, smaller than anything on the Shaman, but you know, it definitely damaged it a little bit, but it's so minor that it's not a big deal really at all. And then you can see the Shaman's catching on the paper a little bit in a couple places where the Endura still just cleanly slices right through. And then the last thing that we're going to do, like I said, is just lightly scrape the edges across the corner, see what happens. K390 normally holds up to this really well. The Shaman, on the other hand, I had no idea how it would do, but given the fact that both of these are, the Shaman's at 64, a little over 64 HRC, the Endura, I want to say it was at 65, but I can't remember for sure. But nonetheless, it rolled the edge pretty bad on the Zwear to a pretty good extent. I could easily catch my fingernail on the burr, and you'll see it better at the end of the video, but you can sort of see it right there. And then on the Endura, it did sort of create a burr. It rolled it over a little bit on the Endura, but not too bad. It was very minor, sort of like a very fine burr that you get at the end of a sharpening session that you're trying to remove. That's sort of what it reminded me of, you know, finishing on a fairly high grit stone. And yeah, so rolled both the edges, but the K390 held up in every aspect, aside from the wire, much better than the Shaman did. And the Zwear didn't do bad at all, I don't think. Just didn't do quite as good as K390 did. And, well, really nothing I've tested up until this point has done as good as K390. And if you guys saw my initial impressions on this knife, you saw the discoloration on the edge. And with my experience so far in sharpening it, the edge retention that it's had, I'm not 100% sure that I'm down to the full hardness of the blade at the apex yet. I think it might need a couple more edges on it. Not 100% sure. But, you know, overall, I really don't think it did that bad. Did better than some other steels I've tried like this. Did worse than some others. That's sort of mid-range in the pack with this result, I would say. And maybe it'll get a little bit better. If it does, I'll do this again. If I notice an increase in impact resistance with a couple more sharpenings, or, you know, edge stability and edge retention, we'll do an edge retention test either way with both of these. But yeah, if it starts to get a little bit better, I'll do this again so you guys can see it and see if the impact resistance gets a little bit better. But so far, K390 is still the king. Still probably my favorite tool steel, at least out of the ones that I've used so far. And yeah, I think K390 is pretty phenomenal. And I think Zwear's pretty good too. But I'm hoping that the performance will jump up a little bit, maybe with a couple more sharpenings. So you guys stay tuned for that if you want to see it, and stay tuned for the edge retention test if you want to see those. Thanks for watching.